School security experts say before armed guards and before metal detectors, there's something simpler and cheaper that could do more good. Colorado Republicans turn on each other over whether to recall Democrats for keeping their promises. Mayor Hancock's challengers unite against him, while the mayor recycles old endorsements as if we and you aren't smart enough to know the difference. Hick's presidential run is so desperate for attention, he's calling people traitors. And we celebrate some good news, a Coloradan who says she turned weakness into strength to improve our community. That's next.
If I handed you money and told you to spend it to improve school security, what would you do? I can hear people saying armed guards, people saying mental health resources. But what if we're ignoring something very simple? Our Steve Staker takes a look.
We need metal detectors.
It's a refrain we've heard over and over again this week. There's even a petition circulating with 22,000 signatures demanding metal detectors in all Colorado schools.
Metal detectors may have worked in this particular case, but overall speaking, there have been situations where schools have had metal detectors and students have still gotten weapons into the school.
We checked around today and couldn't find a local district that uses metal detectors. In fact, Christine Harms, director of the Colorado School Safety Resource Center, says she doesn't know of any schools in the state that use metal detectors.
There's been research done on that, and it's not definitive whether it is extremely helpful or not.
Harms says metal detectors are expensive to buy and even more expensive to staff.
I think there's better ways to spend resources than metal detectors.
She says the best form of physical security is individual door locks for each classroom, something many schools in Colorado still don't have.
To my knowledge, we have not lost any students in an active shooter situation in the United States when they have been secured behind a locked door.
And while physical forms of better security are easy to see, Harms says it's important to invest in some resources that may be tougher to see, like mental health resources.
If a student feels a connection to the school, feels like there's an adult, at least one that they feel close to, and they have peers there, they are much less likely to act in any violent way towards the schools.
Last year, state legislators set aside nearly $30 million for school improvements and school safety improvements, and they got $60 million in requests from districts. A lot of those requests came from rural school districts without a lot of resources. In fact, Christine told me about one school that sent in a request. They said, we need a new front door because the front door doesn't lock.
Oh, jeez.
So these kinds of things are out there.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, when you talk about Douglas County just getting $10 million infused, the state yesterday, or the state last year, for all districts, put $30 million in the kitty.
Sure.
There.
So, I mean, all of these school safety measures have a physical impact, they could have a deterrent effect, and they could have a psychological impact, whether you're talking about armed guards or metal detectors or more locks.
Metal detectors in particular,
sure.
Let's talk about that. So they could have the deterrent effect, but they could also have the effect of making kids feel like they're in a jail, like they're in prison, and that's the psychological impact that Christine Harms says you have to take into account when you're talking about metal detectors.
Interesting conversation. We'll continue it. Thank you, Steve. You are invited. All are invited to a memorial service for 18-year-old Kendrick Castillo, the young man who gave his life to protect his friends during the STEM school shooting. His service tomorrow afternoon at 1 o'clock at Cherry Hills Community Church is open to the public, and you can also watch it live on 9news.com, 9 News Facebook page, or our YouTube channel. A Democratic state legislator facing a new recall effort has an unusual supporter, the Republican that he unseated last year. Former State Representative Cole Wist unleashed on the Colorado Republican Party and Rocky Mountain gun owners today for trying to recall Democratic legislator Tom Sullivan. RMGO, the gun rights group, campaigned against the Republican Wist after he sponsored last year's version of the red flag gun control bill that failed at the Capitol. Well, now they're going after the Democrat, Sullivan, for keeping his campaign promise to pass a similar red flag bill. The Republican Wist said what a good number of political observers in this state believe, that RMGO owns the Colorado Republican Party.
There was a group that targeted me in last year's election who are now targeting the individual who succeeded me in office, and it seemed to be the height of hypocrisy. So it was time to, I think, speak out and talk about why this process doesn't work for voters. It doesn't work for the process. And frankly, I think it makes everyone much more cynical about politics. Now, I think there are some legitimate reasons why people have concerns about some of the bills that passed in the legislature. But in the House of Representatives, you have an opportunity to have an election every 2 years. So Mr. Sullivan will be on the ballot next year. It seems to me that that would be the more appropriate time to have a conversation about whether he should be returned to office.
Rocky Mountain Gun Owners is trading insults on social media today with a number of Republicans who are pointing out that these recall elections serve as great fundraisers for the gun rights group, but might actually help keep seats in Democratic hands. Denver Mayor Michael Hancock is running against Jamie Gillis, but he now faces the united opposition of his three main challengers. The other two stood side by side with Gillis today and pledged to back her to replace Mayor Hancock. Now, given their strong disagreements, our Marshall Zellinger wondered what they'd been promised.
This is a humbling day.
Of course I wasn't on board, and I had reservations initially because we ran against each other.
Lisa Calderon, during our debate in April, did not say she would vote for Jamie Gillis in a runoff.
Would you vote for Mayor Hancock over any of the other challengers?
I would vote for Penfield Tate next, yes.
We all want the best for Denver.
Actually, it still is true. It wasn't anybody but Hancock. It was, let's make sure that whoever it is reflective of the views and the values I care about. I didn't want to just throw my endorsement as a protest vote against Hancock. I wanted to be meaningful and move our city forward.
That's how you build a great city.
Just like Calderon, Tate told us during our debate he would vote for her next. He did not say Gillis either. Tate told me Gillis's call on election night went to his voicemail.
Kind of like Lisa said, I took a couple days just to reflect. I had to sit down with my staff. It's an emotional time. It's very frustrating. There are tears and there's anguish and there's angst. And so it took a few days for me to get back to Jamie, but I got back to her.
This is a city that has to serve everybody.
So what role do you expect in a Mayor Gillis administration?
I don't have any expectations at all. You know, Marshall, when I ran in 2003, I endorsed Hickenlooper. I co-chaired his transition team and never took a job in the administration.
What were you promised for your support?
We weren't promised anything for our support, other than integrating our platforms together.
Jamie, do you expect these two to work for you if you're mayor?
I expect that we're going to work together as we go forward, win this election through transition, and then I hope they'll be a part of changing the city going forward.
There's got to be something that we're not hearing. What am I missing?
That's because that's how we're used to the city operating, that it's you have to make deals, and we didn't make a deal.
Maybe I couldn't hear it because of those sirens going off. One thing Gillis needs to mesh her position on is the urban camping ban. She's against it, but voted no on 300, saying that it went beyond just repealing the camping ban. And that's one of the issues Calderon and Tate will likely have input on, Kyle, between now and 3 weeks from now when you vote.
Sure. And of course, the real question here is, can Calderon and Tate move their supporters to Gillis? If that happens, then Mayor Hancock is in deep trouble. If not, he's probably fine. Speaking of the mayor, he held an event like right across the street today.
1 hour earlier, on the other side of the sidewalk from the city and county building, he had now presidential candidate, former mayor, Governor Hickenlooper. I gave him 3 titles there.
Yeah.
Vidal, Wellington Webb, Bill Vidal was former mayor. All former mayors that we had heard from before that said, I already support Hancock, so we didn't give that much attention to people who were just re-upping their support instead of the new support.
Sure. Just put it in the microwave, warm it back up, and serve it to everybody again. All right. Thank you, Marshall.
Our next question comes from a viewer named LT. LT asks, if someone didn't vote in the May 7th election, can the same person vote in the June 4th runoff election?
Why'd you skip the first round, LT? No, I'm sure you're asking for a friend, right? As long as your voter registration is active and up to date, you can vote in that runoff election. Mail-in ballots are going out soon, and they're due back by June 4. You can vote even if you skip that first round of voting in May. The mayor and Jamie Gillis will debate on 9 News next Tuesday, 7 p.m. on Channel 20. Get your popcorn ready. Marshall and I will moderate. This week is dedicated to honoring America's police officers who were killed in the line of duty. We have told you about Denver police officer Charles Wanless, killed in 1890. Our Noel Brennan went searching for that fallen officer's grave and then learned why he couldn't find it.
This would have been a uniform like the officers from the 1890s would have worn.
They dressed differently back then.
This is a hat badge from the 1890s.
And things weren't so high-tech.
So that's how they got people's attention back then.
Denver police officers of decades ago risked the same as officers today. Some did not come home.
Here in Denver, 72. And then in Colorado, it's up to 312.
Of those buried in Denver, 4 caught the attention of the Denver Police Museum.
Unfortunately, we have found that 4 officers do not have headstones. They are people who put their lives on the line to make our community what it is. And to me, it's just a symbol of respect.
Patrolman Alson McCasland, killed in a police motorcycle crash in 1935. Officer Thomas Clifford, gunned down by a drunken soldier in 1899. Officer William Griffiths heard the shots, commandeered a bicycle to chase down the suspect, and he too was shot. And Charles Wanless, the only mounted police officer killed, shot in 1890.
So this is an electronic magnifying glass.
The only record of his grave is in the books at Riverside Cemetery.
Looking within that lot to find, again, who he's buried next to.
Few know he rests beneath the grass in lot 236 of Block 9.
We believe very strongly that if somebody died in the line of duty for our city, that they should have a headstone.
The museum wants to provide markers families may not have been able to afford.
My hope is that in the next year to 2 that we can get that done.
So Denver will know where heroes rest.
It's a sign of respect.
For Next, I'm Noel Brennan.
The Denver Police Museum is welcoming donations to cover the cost of the special headstone, which they think could run upwards of $2,500.
People doubted her because of her disability.
I'm 31 years old. I have a 5th grade reading level with my eyes, but I went to Columbia University Graduate School.
She proved him wrong, and her success is helping a larger community. And former Governor Hickenlooper said something absolutely shocking in his run for president, and it appears no one noticed. Next.
Last week, it was wind, rain, and snow. This week, it's sunshine and 80s. Yep, 80 degrees in Denver today, way above the average of 71, and we could go warmer tomorrow. There's moisture rotating around high pressure, which is centered off to the west of us. The clockwise flow means that thunder showers are moving from the northwest toward the east-southeast. Non-severe, and right now, with the storm track to the north of us, we're on our way to an even warmer day tomorrow and Thursday before that ridge breaks down. But just enough moisture coming in underneath that we have to track a couple of high base storms that may mean a sprinkle, a little wind and lightning. That's tonight and again tomorrow. But mild temperatures, we'll look for lows in the 40s and 50s for much of eastern Colorado. Downtown, low 52. That's where we start tomorrow morning. Sunshine at 84 degrees tomorrow. Another nice day coming up Thursday, a little cooler Friday. 20% chance of thunder showers on Saturday. Sunday, close to 70, and then a few more spring-like rain showers coming in on Monday. And don't forget to download the 9 News Weather app, Kyle. Very handy with severe weather looming.
I should try that sometime. Thank you, Kathy. Former Governor John Hickenlooper has struggled to gain traction and attention in his run for president, which might explain his latest tactic, accusing a Republican leader of treason, which is punishable by death. This was Hickenlooper on the progressive podcast, Pod Save America.
I look at someone like Mitch McConnell when he came in and said that he would do everything humanly possible within his power to make sure that as president, Barack Obama had no successes.
Yeah.
I mean, that verges on, that's treasonous,
Right.
right? I mean, that's someone who's an elected official saying that they want to work against the common good of Americans.
All right, so here we are again on this. Trying to deny your political opponent's victories might be selfish, it might be counterproductive, but it is not the crime of treason that we have executed people for committing. We had this very same conversation when President Trump was suggesting that journalists he doesn't like are treasonous. We have got to get past this particular moment where political enemies are talked about as enemies of the state, guilty of criminally betraying America. Hickenlooper is not going to trump Trump in hyperbolic trash talking, and the only thing sadder than what Hick said is the fact that no one seems to have noticed. There's a woman in our community who caught our attention. She says she turned weakness into strength, proving wrong all those who doubted her due to her disability. Our Anusha Roy caught up with Alexandra Connell.
I want you to wash your hands. This early in the work week,
Beautiful day.
Andy's perspective is one a lot of us could use.
Okay.
So he looks forward to work at Pizzability,
Andy's one of our rock stars.
where nothing is taken for granted, like a shirt that Andy can put on himself.
Yeah.
This is one of our magnetic button-down shirts, and this was created by a woman named Maura Horton, and she created this for her husband who had Parkinson's.
It's from a business called Patty and Ricky, founded by Alexander Connell, inspired by her mom and her battle with brain cancer and her cousin.
ADHD, I'm fast also.
Alexander's story is worth hearing too.
I'm 31 years old. I have a 5th grade reading level with my eyes, but I went to Columbia University Graduate School with my ears. So all of my books on tape.
So no surprise, she learned to advocate for herself from her mom after being diagnosed with ADHD and dyslexia.
Kind of looking at smartness in a different way.
While picking up her flair for fashion.
I couldn't believe that there wasn't a beautiful marketplace for people to shop.
So she created one herself.
Every single one of our staff struggles with tying their aprons, putting on, getting dressed for work.
Adaptive fashion? Yeah. It's just starting.
Which in itself makes a statement.
You might have to do things a little bit differently. You might have to find technology that works for you to kind of make those weaknesses into strengths.
So the company is using more than 65 designers, most of them who have disabilities. And Alexandra says that they're always looking for new ideas and new designers as well, Kyle.
Everybody's different experience brings them to a different point with new ideas in life. So
absolutely.
Let's welcome in. All right. Thank you, Anusha. We're back in a moment with a clear message. It's not summer yet. And an ex-viewer asked me to settle a debate that we really should not be having. It's a sign that while it feels like summer, spring has not fully sprung. Next viewer named Dave took this picture at Boyd Lake State Park, popular place for swimming in Loveland, just no swimming. That is a temporary sign. They'll be taking that off come Memorial Day weekend when they open for the season. But if you see a sign or a scene that makes you do a double take, like a swimming hole with a no swimming sign, email pictures to next@9news.com or get our attention with the hashtag #HeyNext. Deborah Hanson-Naiman writes in about the idea of a recall election against Democratic Representative Tom Sullivan, saying, I'm pretty sure the voters in Sullivan's district knew who he was and what he stood for when he was running. I did, and he's not my representative. So why try to recall? It's not as if he hit his stance to get elected. Deborah, I'm starting to think that maybe these recalls aren't all about recalling politicians. Perhaps there's some other things in play that we can continue to examine on this program. Nancy writes in with an interesting question tonight, asking, I'd like to get some options on a subject I'm not real clear or smart on. Is it wrong to hang a Confederate flag in an office setting? Well, Nancy, I would say it depends on your type of office. If you work for the Confederate States of America, engaged in open rebellion against America to defend the rights of slaveholders, well then sure, put up that Confederate flag at the office. If you work for some other kind of business, skip the Confederate flag above the water cooler. We'll see you next time.